Let's take a look at Mark chapter 16. In chapter 16, verse 15, it is written, He said to them, Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Jesus told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. What will happen to those who believe the gospel and are baptized? Jesus said that they will be saved. Shouldn't this wonderful news be preached to all creation? The gospel should be preached not only in Korea and to our neighbors, but also to everyone in the whole world. Therefore, isn't the gospel of the kingdom the news that saves all creation? The news of this world delivers death. However, the gospel of the kingdom gives life to all people. The news that saves all people is the good news, that is, the gospel. Then from the biblical point of view, what is the gospel? Though this is something we know very well, let us review this one more time today. Let's turn to Colossians chapter 1. In verse 23 it reads, If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel, this is the gospel that you heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become. What has he become? A servant of the gospel. If we look at the mated verse, we can clearly understand what the gospel is. Let's move on to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. In chapter 3, verse 6, it is written, He has made us competent as what? Ministers of a new covenant. Regarding this verse, who wrote the book of 2 Corinthians? It was Apostle Paul who wrote the book of Colossians and 2 Corinthians. In Colossians chapter 1, Paul referred to himself as a servant of the gospel. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul referred to himself as a minister of the new covenant. Paul didn't lie. This means that there is no difference between the new covenant and the gospel, right? Since they have the same meaning, Paul referred to himself as a minister of the new covenant and a servant of the gospel. Then the gospel refers to the new covenant, and the new covenant refers to the gospel. Then why is the new covenant the gospel? What kind of news is contained in the new covenant? It is the good news. What kind of news is the good news? Isn't the news that saves people the good news? Then what truth in the new covenant is the news that saves people? That is, the good news and the gospel. Let's take a look at the Gospel of John chapter 6 and confirm that the new covenant is indeed the good news. Let's turn to John chapter 6, verse 53. Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. In other words, doesn't this mean we cannot live? Let's continue. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has. What do they have? Eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. What does Jesus' flesh and blood represent in the words of truth written in the Gospel of Luke chapter 22? In Luke chapter 22, we can see that the Passover bread represents Jesus' flesh, and the Passover wine represents Jesus' blood. Then what is contained in the Passover? It is eternal life. The Passover is the new covenant. What is the new covenant? It is the gospel. This world brings the news of death as new news every day. That's why we need to preach the good news to the whole world. Such a work must be accomplished quickly. It is because God will grant mankind eternal life, not a temporary life. If we are to live forever in a place of pain and torment, it would be a curse. Don't you agree? Where will He let us live forever? Yes, it is heaven. We will live in the eternal kingdom of heaven, where joy and happiness overflows, and we can have everything we have hoped for. God promised that He will let us live in that place forever. Therefore, what is the new covenant? It is the gospel and the good news. Through all these teachings of the truth, we can realize that we have received the greatest news. Should we keep this good news only to ourselves? The more we preach the good news, the better. Father An Sang-hong and New Jerusalem Heavenly Mother, who are the Spirit and the Bride, have come to this earth to preach the blessed message of the new covenant that allows us to enter the eternal kingdom of heaven.